Board? Okey doke. Is there a flashing red button I should know about, or?
This light over here.
That light, there we go, we're live, okay. Good evening, this is the meeting of the Planning Board of the Town of Harwich, and it's being held in person, although it's also available as a live broadcast on Channel 18. Members of the public with an interest in any portion or specific item on the agenda should plan for in-person attendance. Today is Tuesday, July 27th, 2021. And according to Massachusetts state law, anyone who intends to record the meeting must first notify the chair, who will then inform the other attendees at the start of the meeting. Seeing that there is nobody who's attending the meeting, I'm assuming that nobody here is going to be recording. And if you are not here, please raise your hand. So shall we stand and do our Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So, we have no public hearings, but we do have a public meeting with several new pieces of new business. I turn it over to the town planner, Mr. Eidman.
Thanks. I won't go over priorities now because that was supposed to be more of a interactive discussion, and probably is worth putting that off till we have a fuller complement of the board. But some procedural ideas I've had in my first couple of weeks. The open meeting law does not dictate how meeting minutes be approved. It's not prescriptive as to how meeting minutes are approved. If you like the way meeting minutes are approved, we can continue doing them as many boards do them and as we do them, which you take the minutes to a public meeting, and then there's a vote. But they could theoretically be compiled, and then the chair can approve them.
Okay.
The benefits of doing it that way are that there's much less process. They don't have to be taken back to the board. I guess the detriments are you'll always be able to review them, but you have, I guess, less say-so in them if they don't go to a meeting and then you review them there. So I wouldn't have...
I think we found really good feedback in minute review. It may only be 3 or 4 times a year, but usually it's something worth doing. And I mean, I know you've combed through and found things, so I suggest that we keep an eagle eye. Although that requires getting them prior to the night of the meeting, especially for longer minutes. Right. And I think Elaine used to get it to us sort of the packets, the week before. So yeah, I don't know if that's possible, but
They can be emailed. We can review them a day or two before.
Yeah.
Don't worry about the mail that way.
Yeah, and they don't have to be approved. I mean, if you do indeed take them to the board, they don't have to be approved at the subsequent meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's good to have a chance to review the minutes for providing comments to staff or to the chair of any issues that come up from memory.
Okay.
And then let the chairman approve them.
Okay.
That sound all right?
Sounds good.
Yeah, I mean, technically, it's the board that's approving them. If you take them to a meeting, then you actually have to put them specifically on. It's not a huge problem, but when you have the board approve minutes too, you actually have to put them on the agenda, and you can't have a standing item that says approval of any prior meeting minutes. You have to actually say with specificity what those meeting minutes are. So if you actually don't have them at the time, you might not put them on the agenda, so you might actually be in a strange position where you actually have compiled them, but you weren't able to put them on the agenda, so they can't be approved.
Right.
The way this board approves minutes is the most popular method of doing so, kind of the standard of doing so. I wasn't looking to talk you out of that.
Okay,
I just wanted to offer you that there is another option, and the open meeting law is not prescriptive about how they are approved. It sounds like you like the way you do them. I have no problem with that.
John, I have a question along those lines. And I agree that I think the way we have been doing them is probably the best from my perspective, that, as long as we, as Dave said, we can, no pressure, but as long as we can get them before we come and walk in the door and sit down. I feel a little uncomfortable voting on the minutes like we've done in the past couple of weeks, where we just got them that night, and quite honestly, I haven't had the time at the meeting to read them. So if we can get them,
Okay,
you know, a week, or even like 2 or 3
48
days.
hours,
Yeah,
right?
enough time to go
Doable.
through
You know,
them.
like the Friday before the meeting.
Yeah,
Right.
perfect.
That's doable.
okay.
The other question that I have, and I'm glad this is here, because, and I think this was raised a couple of years ago. I had questioned the state law, if there is one. You just explained they're not prescriptive about how minutes are taken, but I guess maybe more in a court of law, what ways or what is considered, if something has to go to court, like we're in the middle of now possibly, do the written minutes outweigh the video? Whereas the video is obviously word for word as long as it's captured properly, versus the minutes are somebody's interpretation, even though we've all voted on it. If there's any question in a court of law, I would think that would be the deciding factor. But I recall the conversation a couple of years ago with Charlene, and she said it was the written minutes that would be allowable in court, whereas video of the meeting would not be.
Yeah,
You know, is that-
I've never seen video of meetings introduced in court as evidence. Minutes are, and one of the principal reasons they are is the open meeting law requires that they be taken. So even though we're living in an age where probably the quote, best evidence, unquote, is an audio-visual recording, you still have to take minutes. And the rule of minutes is that they basically have to summarize what occurred, including votes, for someone who did not attend. So it doesn't have to be incredibly detailed, just so I can articulate my philosophy of minutes. I don't think they should be verbatim.
Right.
And I don't think they should be incredibly detailed. There's a problem there because communication, you can take a verbatim transcript and read it and say, this didn't happen.
Right.
Because so much of communication is nonverbal.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But the minutes become important, but they're just one type of evidence. Yeah.
I think also in this situation, we have the first suit of two
Yeah.
is going to be one where if the arbitrating party were to look at the video, there's no ambiguity about what transpired in that meeting. And I'm not quite too sure whether or not the minutes reflect that conduct. So, and that was a Zoom meeting.
Yeah. Well, in either case, what's most important is the decision, the written decision that was made.
Right.
That's
Okay.
the action from which the appeal is taken.
Yeah.
So the minutes aren't, I don't want to say they're unimportant, but they're not as important as you'd think.
Okay.
And interestingly, the standard for certain appeals is a, quote, record appeal. You take all the information that was provided to the board at the hearing, and that goes to the court, and the court decides, based on all that information, could the board have made the decision it wanted to make. There are other types of appeals that are called de novo appeals, and like that special permit appeal is a de novo appeal. And basically what the court gives extreme deference to the board, but actually it can find its facts anew. It doesn't have to cede to the fact finding that the board does. It has its own hearing, again, and can admit evidence that was not admitted at the board level. It can take witness testimony, those witnesses of whom did not testify at the board level. So, yeah, I don't want to go down the rabbit hole with this, but minutes, interestingly, are not as important as you think they might be. But they are a type of evidence that would maybe be admitted. More often than not to show that maybe somebody was biased, but not to show that necessarily the decision wasn't made properly just because one board member disagreed with others.
What about attachments to the minutes? We get the drawings and your recommendations, and of course, sometimes we have statements or written or otherwise from the audience.
Mm-hmm.
To what extent should those be included?
Yeah. The open meeting law requires not just that things that were submitted be included, but things that were, quote, used at the meeting by the board. So if you notice the way we're taking minutes, there's a section that says material used at the meeting. So we put the agenda in there, we put the staff report. It doesn't merely have to, but you don't have to say application, because you've made references to the application. And you don't have to put in everything that was provided. Now, something that is provided, we end up putting in the project file and, keeping it in that way. And, if there's ever an appeal, we'll turn the entire
But they don't have
file
to
over.
be, they don't have to be listed as attachments to the minutes.
No, in fact, well, these things that are used at the meeting have to be listed, but they actually don't. The open meeting law specifically references that they don't actually have to physically be attached to the minutes. It sometimes is good practice to do that, but you actually just have to list them. They don't have to be attached. But they're going to be in your file. They're in our planning file anyway.
So I see you have something here about signing minutes. I don't recall ever signing minutes.
Yeah, well, you don't
Or do we
actually have to
tacitly-
sign. Yeah, you don't have to, you actually don't have to sign minutes. But if you went to a process where the board wasn't looking at them, but the chair would be reviewing them,
Right.
you would want the chair's signature.
Right.
The way you've been doing it is, Leisha might sign for taking the minutes. But,
Gotcha.
yeah, the chair doesn't need to sign it. Though I have seen minutes done like the board does it, where you actually take a vote of the board, and then the chair ends up signing anyway. It's not prohibited, though it's not
Belt and
necessary.
suspenders approach, right?
Yeah, I don't think it's just the practical, difficulty, which is why I even raised the issue of sometimes catching up with people to get signatures, and that's kind of a segue into the next section with plans.
Right.
So in the same way that the chair I'm sorry.
I'm just thinking about what you just said. So if we continue the way that we have, it sounds like there is no need for anyone to sign, chairman or anyone to sign it, and the approval or disapproval, the approval of the minutes is being voted upon by the board. That'd be in the next, would that be in the next meeting's minutes? If there were ever any question, well, did this get approved? Right, you look at the other
Yeah,
next meeting and,
Exactly, it's a little circular.
yeah.
Yeah, you're going to look at the subsequent minutes to see what was, and for that reason, sometimes it's helpful. It doesn't have to be the chair. It can be JI, approved at meeting of planning board on X date. Because we actually end up taking the approved minutes and putting them on the website as well. So.
Thank you. Sorry for the
Oh,
interruption.
no.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so the segue now is to plans, because we've seen through COVID and other matters, it's sometimes difficult to get signatures. The nice thing is the board, and when we're talking about plans, we're specifically looking at the subdivision control law, either A&Rs or subdivision plans. The nice thing with subdivision plans is the board, which all boards don't do, the board always issues a decision as well as, signs the plan, and then there's going to be a covenant as well. So we could actually, and before I drafted any policy, I just wanted to talk with the board. I could draft a policy where, and this has been done in Harwich in the past, there wasn't a written policy, but specifically with A&R plans, just the chair signed. You didn't have, A&Rs are pretty easy because we can send them around the room, but we could always have a policy saying in the absence of, the signature of a quorum of the board, the chair could sign, planning director can sign. This just prevents some of the difficult situations we might face with logistics.
Right.
During COVID or something. We could do the same thing with subdivision plans. I would want to write a written policy first for your review, and it wouldn't.
Can it be stated as like a contingency policy?
Oh, exactly,
Okay.
exactly. It doesn't have to substitute for a I think we should always try to have the board with A&R plans and subdivision plans sign them with a majority of the board.
Right.
But in the event we can't do that,
Right.
it would be nice to be able to have a fallback plan. Even with decisions, and I'm glad you raised this in the earlier segment about minutes, Craig, because really ultimately what we rely on is the vote of the board, which is captured in minutes. Signatures are largely ministerial, but the signature itself also seems to have some independent significance, because years down the line, you don't want to have to rifle through minutes, some of which aren't even recorded at the Registry of Deeds, to determine well, this is interesting, this plan has one signature on it.
Right.
You could ultimately, you could either record something, or you could look at minutes or whatever, but sometimes it is a lot easier to see those signatures on a plan. I'm just thinking that if, God forbid, we have to go through COVID again, something like that, and it's difficult to get people to come in and sign things, even though we might be having meetings virtually.
Right.
Having something like that might be helpful.
Sounds like a good idea.
So maybe what I would propose, I'm not going to do anything with the minutes because it sounds like everybody's happy with that. What I could do at this point, even hearing from 3 members, is draft some relatively simple policy, which would largely be like a contingency or in the alternative. It would actually broaden what you could do rather than
Right.
Abbreviate it.
So we could probably, in theory, license the use of this for a period of time, and then say we have to revote to like extend it or have it revert after X number of days or something like that.
If that's the way you want to do it, or what I would suggest is you do it just for your calendar year. Yeah, I mean, you could,
To expire midnight, December 31st. Kind of thing.
some boards do just policies from time immemorial, and then you always have the ability to,
Unwind it.
yeah, revoke a policy.
Right.
But why don't I just start with language, and you can tell me what you like or don't like about it,
Sounds good.
and we can have that as a talking point. But before I drafted anything and wasted my time or wasted your time,
Right.
I wanted to have at least this conversation first so you could see where I was coming from.
Great.
Especially where I didn't want you to think I was undercutting, your authority, but it's a practical matter. It's a logistical issue.
Makes sense.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to discuss with you tonight is, you recall during the pandemic, you voted on a potential zoning change, had a hearing, made a recommendation that it ultimately be adopted, but it actually never made it onto the warrant. And that was a change regarding 32542L of the zoning bylaw, which dealt with parking setbacks. So I'd recently gotten communication from the assistant town administrator saying, look, are you interested in bringing that back anytime soon, getting it on a warrant? Especially because from what I understand, there's a possibility there may be a special town meeting in the fall. So, hey, we understand there's a zoning amendment hanging out there. You want to bring it onto the warrant. But before I just jumped right in and did that, again, I don't want to step on your authority. Whatever you want to do, honor that. But the way I think this could potentially be done in a better way, so I just wanted to discuss that with you. What this zoning amendment did is, in the MRL and MRL1 district, it basically changed the setbacks from 50-50-50, which seem excessive. And it basically said for an existing property, you could rely on existing setbacks, or they could be similar to the other zoning districts. I don't know why we're doing parking setbacks per zoning district, especially where the preamble says that they don't apply to single or two-family uses. So how could you ever have a parking setback in an RR, RM, RL, RH1? I mean, there are no uses except single-family or two-family uses in those districts. And to the extent you can have multifamily now, why would you distinguish setbacks in one type of district from another? So what I would suggest is, and obviously I would take it back to you, that the setbacks be based on uses, not on zoning districts.
That makes sense.
Okay?
That makes too much sense. I think we ought to disregard it.
Okay.
That really makes sense.
Okay, especially because the preamble suggests that too.
Right.
And the rest of,
And
which
I think if the preamble sets that up, but then we start getting into these line by line, especially with street and side and rear declensions, then it muddies the water, doesn't it? I mean,
I think so. Well, the rest of this section, 39 through 44, is all the parking type stuff. They're all based on uses. Even the parking schedule, the number of spaces, aren't per district, they're per use. This is kind of just this is an odd duck here, that you would start having setbacks, parking setbacks per district. So I think an easy way to potentially fix that is just have the use. And you probably don't even need a schedule at that point. You probably just say, this doesn't apply to single or two-family uses, but, shall apply to multifamily, commercial, industrial uses. And I think since the numbers are here already, you'd probably have 20, 10, 10 in, for commercial and multifamily, and for industrial uses, you'd have 15, 5, and 5. The other thing I want to suggest is there appears to be something in here where you wanted the ability, at least for multifamily uses, to have flexibility in terms of parking setbacks. What I would suggest to you, the way to do that, because it already exists in this part, the broader parking section, is during site plan review, you can grant some flexibility or relief as to the number of spaces that are appropriate based on the nature of the development, the use that's before you. I'm not sure why that wouldn't apply to all the parking-related things within the section, whether it's landscaping for parking, whether it's the number of spaces, whether it's setbacks. So I think a couple simple word changes, there's a section that says, the planning board under site plan review may vary the required number of spaces. And then and this is in 325-39A, I would put after spaces something along the lines of setbacks, landscaping, and other, dimensional requirements of sections 39 to 44 inclusive. Doesn't mean you have to grant them, but you would have that discretion.
Right.
But I don't know why you would distinguish between you can grant relief for the number of spaces, but not setbacks, for instance. So I think that's probably the better way to do it, and that's kind of I won't get too deep into it right now, but I see a common theme. Nobody has done really a comprehensive look at our zoning bylaw in a very long time. We have a bylaw and charter review committee. They'd gone into abeyance for a while, but they're back together now. I think looking more at the charter.
Right.
It'd be nice to have a more active bylaw review committee, and I can have that conversation with, say, Anita or others in the town administrator. But bylaws are a lot like seashores or coastlines. You see lots and lots and lots of accretion that over time completely changes the character of the thing. So there's, even without changing concepts, there's a heck of a lot of accretion we might want to look at the zoning bylaws, and we might see a lot of addition by subtraction. There's a lot of things we put in over time, and it's created some internal, and I don't think any fatal internal, inconsistencies, but some internal inconsistencies. We take a totally new approach to multifamily now, but there are still some old references to multifamily or accessory apartments. There are kind of orphan references that don't make a lot of sense in context. And
Well, in the last 3 years, I think we've just seen things kind of come up episodically.
Yeah.
We ought to change this, so we tweak individual things, and all of a sudden, this structure has a different center of gravity after a while, and it's only kind of makes sense, I think, for the hygiene of the town, the kind of planning hygiene, to take a look at the whole thing and stem to stern.
yeah, there isn't one
point of view.
Exactly. There isn't one page I've looked at, and I already have the list going. There isn't one page I've looked at that, and I'm not just talking about picayune things,
Right.
but there isn't one page I've looked at that can't benefit from some relatively minor, change. And I'll get into a discussion with priorities when we have a fuller complement of the board, but to me, that's probably even a little more pressing. I'd love to do a local comprehensive plan, but once you start that, there's no going back.
Right.
It's a long process. In my mind, there's probably a lot of benefit by looking at particular sections of the zoning bylaw even, which the nice thing there is you can do particular sections. When you do an LCP or master plan, there's no reason to stop. Once you get momentum.
Do homeowners and business owners, can they get involved in a formal or informal way in this kind of thing, or is that kind of a conflict of interest?
You mean to suggest changes?
Right, just see what they've gone through, because, just you think of some of the people that have been before the board in the last, I'm sure we'd be opening up a bit of a can of worms, but by the same token, I think there are probably people that have said, this could have gone easier. Maybe it would be better to do like an online poll kind of a thing, or,
Yeah, it's not a conflict of interest, at all.
okay.
Yeah, no, we could do that. We could proceed in that way. We could proceed with the identified or the known deficiencies, but we could also mix that with an idea of, if there are things that the public would like to see changed in the zoning bylaw. you know, without saying that you want to control that process, we would have to curate that discussion pretty
Right.
well.
Right.
Because it shouldn't just be a completely open discussion about
Exactly.
what do you want, what do you want?
Right.
I think we would just want to facilitate that pretty well. And I already have a pretty good idea too, even without introducing completely new concepts. You know, I'm more in the mode of, there are things, some small fixes that could go a long way.
Right.
Because I think there are some broader concepts to think about, just in terms of things like how much development does the town want to see? That I would want to defer to when the town does update its master plan, because those sort of conversations you're going to have during a master plan, and your regulations changes with those sort of things should follow the master plan.
Right.
But there are really kind of Scrivener type of changes at this point.
Yeah.
Stuff I've just seen in reviewing building permits and helping the building commissioner, saying, that definition isn't there, or, you know, that's a lapse, this word should be there to give more sense. Or, but, you know, it's a discussion I want to have with you and the town administrator as well. You know, what should be my focus or my goal?
Yeah.
Because I've gotten lots of calls, let's just do this LCP. But at the same time, we have not unsophisticated regulations, and people are entitled to kind of rely on them and have us administer them and enforce them. But if there's ambiguities with them, that's not particularly fair.
Right. Nobody's helped with that, so.
But I know that's kind of too big a discussion to have now, but
Right.
I wanted to mention it because that's the same sort of thinking I was thinking with the hearing you've already had. I could have said, well, the planning board has already acted, let's do what they've said. But I think we can do it in a better way and a simpler way that actually is kind of a broader fix for the entire section.
Yep.
And you don't have to act on that today, but really why I wanted to take this to you was, you know, Megan had asked me, if we have a fall town meeting, do you want me to put this on? And I said, I'm not particularly enthusiastic about that, but let me ask the planning board, because it's the planning board that's already held the hearing on this and made a recommendation.
Did I see something in the paper? It was like September 3rd or September,
Well, there will be an election.
right?
Is certainly an election. And if we wanted to do something with this, we'd have to hold hearings again.
Right.
We'd have to go through that process pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And it's my personal opinion that it's, not that pressing, and this could be done better without denigrating what happened before.
Right. Okay.
So, you know, you couldn't take the vote anyway, but if you were telling me, no, John, we want it exactly as we did it, and that's important to us, and it's important that you move that forward quickly, I would say absolutely, we'll do that. But
John, is there any kind of time frame that we're under, because the board approved a zoning change, but we haven't gone to town meeting yet with it? And, I mean, could we wait 5 years? That's kind of ridiculous.
No, you
but-
basically, what 48 Section 5 says is you basically have to go through the process again, hold another hearing on it,
Right.
make another recommendation.
Right.
After a certain period of time?
Yes,
Do you
yes.
know what the time is?
One
Yeah.
cycle.
Well, I guess, are we gonna bump up against that?
Well,
now?
you've bumped up against it
Oh, we
already,
already
because your
have.
hearing on it, you've already passed that time where you can basically just put it on another town meeting. Yeah. I want to say it's 9 months.
Okay, thanks.
So you don't have to, you know, necessarily, you can't take any formal action today.
Right.
You don't have to, you can kind of think about it
Well,
next
we
time.
oughta- yeah, that ought to be part of our conversation next time on the 10th.
Yeah. But when we talk about priorities, you should think about, you know, I'm not saying you can't do an LCP and some bylaw changes together, but it becomes significantly more difficult, especially when, you don't have a planning director and an assistant planner, and there's only kind of so much you can do. And I'm telling you right now, with an LCP, I've seen how they worked up at the Cape Cod Commission. It's great to have a consultant, but I don't want to just have a consultant do a master plan.
Right.
It has to be something that's driven by the town
Right.
and represents the town's priorities and values and vision. Yeah, it's, you know, too often they're just given to a consultant, and they're expensive at that point, and they don't really do what you want them to do.
Right.
So I think I have to, and the planning board has to be kind of intimately involved with it. So that's kind of what I had. I know it's not a whole lot, but that's what I had for this evening. And, Yeah, with only three, you can't really take votes on the minutes or the reorganization, the reorganization anyway.
And I don't think we have old business, and Mary is the only one who gives us reports from historical
CPC.
and CPC. So I think that may conclude our business this evening.
Yeah.
Unless we do have somebody in the audience. I'm questioning whether you're here for entertainment value, because you probably, there are probably better venues in town for,
I represent, I'm the administrator of the church on Main Street, and I heard there was gonna be a meeting tonight about parking, so, the minister said, hey, you wanna go down and check it out, so, sorry I'm late, I didn't realize, I went, oh my gosh, there was a meeting, so, I didn't know if you were discussing, any of the issues on Main Street or anything like that.
not tonight.
It was just just a zoning thing that you were doing.
No, we actually did, we were just doing internal, kind of, coming up to speed on some internal priorities, and nothing to deal with parking or.
Okay, all right.
That's
Well-
not even within our bailiwick,
Right.
is it? You're talking about the changes
Yeah.
on Main Street?
Yeah.
I don't think that's within our,
I think there was just this reference to
Right.
32542L, which
Right.
deals generally with parking, and
Right.
there was a lot of discussion about that relative to the Royal. So
Right.
sometimes you put these pieces together, and but yeah, that wasn't the intent in bringing it. I wasn't thinking about any particular property. I knew that
Right.
the board had held a hearing, had made a recommendation, and there was the potential to maybe bring it to a special in the fall, if you were dead set on pursuing exactly what you had
Right.
done before.
Well, we appreciate your attendance and your attention. Sorry we have less than nothing to offer
No, that's okay.
for your edification and entertainment. So I wonder if we can even ask for a vote to adjourn, or whether we simply
You
gavel
never,
it.
you never really, you don't even need to.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, I think our business is concluded here then this evening. Thank you very much for
Second.
coming, and appreciate all your input here, John. Sorry we didn't have, couldn't take action on it.
No, that's okay.
John, have there been any discussions among the town leaders about changing the procedures with the rise of COVID, especially the Delta variant?
Not that I'm aware of. I don't know if we ever discussed this, but at some point, the ability to hold remote hearings in the same way that they were held during COVID ended. So there is a potential now. Yeah, we could go back to that or have hybrid meetings, but I think the select board has expressed, which I agree with, that regulatory boards, if possible, should hold their meetings in person.
Right.
I've enjoyed having in-person meetings with you. So.
That's fine, I just wondered if, CDC's issuing new guidelines or recommendations for schools and things like that. But
Yeah, I'm not sure. And Megan is particularly good at that because that's her background too.
just wondered if there's any, just beginning of any discussion on that.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not aware of it.
you a better? I'll bet you we'll be wearing masks in this meeting within a month.
I wouldn't doubt it.
Probably.
Gotta stop it.
We're all supposed to start coughing on the same time.
Well, thank you for
All right.
attending.
Thank you all.
I saw